So welcome to another laser engraver giveaway review. This one is for the Two Trees laser engraver, which is sitting right in front of me. This will not actually be the laser that's given away. I never got permission from this company to do a giveaway for the product they're giving me, but that's okay because I still have the long array in my shop from a couple months ago. And to be perfectly honest, I like all these lasers. There's things that make certain lasers nicer than others, but essentially the end product, and I say this in every video, is quite similar. So that is also a very good laser. So that will be the one I am giving away. But the review, which is to fulfill the company's requirement, is for the Two Trees. With the giveaway, once again, because I haven't done one of these in a while, if someone contacts you via any sort of avenue other than what is in the official rules, which will be in the description, please ignore them. It's spam. I seem to have solved the problem with spamming the videos because I make it so that all of the comments have to be approved through my account before they're even posted to the video. So whenever a spammer comes into the comments, I see it, I delete it and report them, and that seems to have worked. So I'm not as concerned about spamming as I was when this first happened. But basically just read the entry rules, which will be in the description, follow them, and no purchase necessary. Whoever gets randomly picked from the program I use to do it will get the laser. So for this review, if you've been watching these, they're all pretty standard. I try and do it a similar way to make them as fair as possible. For this one, this was the project that you'll see in the video. If you've watched in the other reviews, you know I've been playing around with making lampshades with these lasers. And I really want eventually to have some sort of lampshade made out of wooden veneer, so the light will not only shine through the design, but the wood as well. So I kind of came to the conclusion that in order to save some money on these projects, if I can't make it out of some sort of paper substance, which I played around with various types of paper with this, I won't be able to make it out of wood. So instead of just burning through expensive veneers, I was practicing with trying to get the design perfected with paper first, and it was successful. This is a successful prototype. This is not the design I'm going to eventually use, but I kind of wanted to make sure that I could get it in the shape I wanted and get a design on the outside of it. So eventually I will have a video showing how to do this with wood veneer, but for now this is kind of and I knew going into it this video would only produce a prototype, but I consider this a successful prototype, and that's basically what you're going to see. So this week's video review is the Two Trees laser. I got this one at this point probably a month ago. I've actually used it quite a bit. I haven't really been cutting a bunch of wood. It's mostly been like paper products for the project I have for this video. But in general, I've had no real issues with any sort of cutting. In fact, the engraving was one of the cleaner, nicer engravings I've had. This is also by far the biggest bed I have. It's 450 by 450 millimeters. Most of them are around 400. So it's nice I have a larger surface. As far as style and design, it's really nice. This one, of all of the lasers I've tested, was the longest to put together with the Dakota. The first Dakota I tested being a close second. Stuff like that doesn't really bother me. I'd rather have a well-built machine that takes longer to put together. But if that is an issue for yourself, heads up, this one did take by far the longest to put together, but it has a lot of nice features. I mentioned that these ones with where the rubber bearing wheels run on these metal tracks are less likely to skip than when it's just the belts, which I do have an issue with in my shop, so I like that. I will talk all day long about why I don't understand why machines don't put some sort of enclosures for the cable management. This one comes with drag chains for the X and the Y axis, so I haven't had any issues with cables clogging up. And like the first Dakota I tested, there's also the wire for the air pump, which will come out the tail end of the machine. This did not come with an air pump, but I already had one from other machines I've tested, so that's how I have that hooked up. The manual that comes with this one leaves a lot left to be desired. I will mention in the video I had a lot of problems getting, this one has automatic focus on it, which when it works is awesome, but I had a lot of problems getting it to work, which honestly I think is more a me problem than the machine problem. But part of the issue is I've used so many of these machines before, you kind of expect them to work a certain way because a lot of them work similarly, but this was very different with the automatic focus. And the instructions on it are a little hazy and hard for myself at least to understand. So I've had a lot of trial and error getting that to work. I think I've got it working pretty well now the way that I do it, but I don't necessarily think it's the proper way to do it. Another nice thing is this comes with an external tensioner, so you don't have to take any bolts and stuff off to tighten these belts, which is nice. I do like that it's lifted off of the table quite a bit. It just makes it's easier to get pieces in and out. The sides are nice and open, so you could slide pieces in and out, and you'll see that that's convenient with what I'm building for this, and you don't really have to lift the bed up. This cover in the front to keep your eyes protected from the lasers is kind of nice, but most of the time my focal point is going to be up here, so that kind of renders this useless. But I do like the idea of these machines. I actually saw one that the entire top is now covered, because this is a 10-watt lasers, but as these 20-watt, and I know they're now coming out with 40-watt lasers are on the market, they will permanently damage your eyes. So it's super important to wear eye protection when running one of these, especially with these more powerful lasers. But in general, minus those couple little things I didn't really like about it, I've had no issues with this machine. It works perfectly. I just need to fine-tune the raising and lower mechanism. And then the other problem I had was once I framed out the piece, this one doesn't want to start from where the framing ends. It wants to reframe, but I'll mention all of that in the video.
So I don't really do unboxings with these videos, but I usually try and show the contents of what's inside of them. For this laser, the packaging was very nice, but I don't care for excessive packaging. It was came in a big box with 3 separate boxes that were labeled A, B, and C, but I essentially just ended up taking all the pieces out of all of the boxes to put it together. That's just a personal preference. Like I said, I don't like excessive packaging, especially nowadays, but on the flip side, everything was nicely packaged. It also came with one of these kits for trying out on your laser, which if I remember I will put with the giveaway, because I don't need one of these. I'll put it with the longer array giveaway for someone to try out with their products. And this is the laser put together, pretty standard stuff. Like I said, this was one of the longer ones to put together, but the ones with drag trains and cable management usually are. You could see this was the first time I hooked it up to my computer. It homed perfectly. I had no issues, which was nice. The one difference between this laser and the X tool was like this too, is usually I manually import the laser, which you could see I named it 2 trees, but with this one there's a file on the SD card they want you to upload, and that is because, as you can see on the side there, this is the configuration for the autofocus. So when you upload their special file in the microchip, it gives you some more components in Lightburn. So that took a little bit of time to figure out, because like I said, the instruction manual is not the best. But once I had that going, I could start practice engraving this. If you watch these videos, you know this is standard. I just like to get a sense of if they're working properly right off the bat, if I have the belts tensioned properly and whatnot. Now in the instructions, they do give you a basic list of settings for the laser, which I do like. All of these lasers are very different. The settings are going to be extremely different. So for someone getting it, it's nice to have a basis to start from on what you should be engraving and cutting all the settings, and then you can work from there. Essentially, you're not flying blind with these companies that give you a rough list of the settings to start with. So I fine-tuned that engraving, and like I said in the introduction, this machine produced a really nice, clear, clean engraving, but all of the machines pretty much do. This one was just kind of exceptionally crisp. So you can see I'm framing out the piece, and then I'm going to autofocus it. And the problem I was having was the machine was not autofocusing, it was just jamming into the piece. I think it's just a matter of the instructions. I'm missing some sort of part. You can't hear it, but that's what it was doing. It was jamming into the wood. But here it is working properly. It ticks down on the piece with that little probe, and then it can start. But then when I would start the project, it would go to start. I think what happens is when you autofocus, it thinks it's at home. Here's the instructions for how to counteract that, and basically what they want you to do is, after you autofocus and frame, they want you to reset the machine to using different coordinates. That is just annoying to me. So what I ended up doing was, once I had this framed where I want it, I would send the laser home and start the job from home, and that seemed to solve all of those problems. I did some test cuts on 1/4 inch material. It works really nicely. Like in these reviews, I've already done thorough reviews of these machines cutting pieces, so I'm not going to get into that. If it cuts nicely, it cuts nicely. So if you don't watch the channel, these are some images of some lampshades I'd already made. I liked these, but I didn't love them. This is the first one that I used plans off of Etsy. And then the other one was the one I made by myself. I kind of wanted to combine these two concepts because I like the way the light shines through the textured piece. In this solid piece, you don't really get that nice pattern on the wall. So basically I was going to, like I said, combine those two ideals to make a whole new lampshade. But I'm going to do this out of paper to save a lot of time, money, and frustration. I went through multiple configurations of this in this piece, and I'm happy I made it out of paper because I'm still going to be making them. You can see this was a clip where I had framed it out, and then once again it was moving to the wrong spot. At this point was when I figured out if I framed it, just sent the laser home and started from home, it works properly. So I've been playing around for a couple months with making circles out of these patterns. And basically I thought I could use that for the lampshade if I cut the tops and bottoms off of the circle to get the shape I wanted, because I like the shape of the more textured piece a lot. I didn't really want to mess with that. So I went through and I cut out this pattern that I already have on my computer. This is basically an exploded globe is where I originally got this pattern from. And then I could go through and cut off the tops and the bottoms, which will give me the lampshade shape that I want. And then at the end of the video, I will show you how I did all of this on the computer. Didn't want to put it in the middle of the video because I don't think a lot of people will find it interesting. But if you want to see the computer side of how I did this, that's at the end of the video. And then I was left with this pattern. From here, I could work on making the files I need for the computer, because in order to get the lampshade size I want, I have to blow up this entire thing. So I started by playing around with this in my software, and at the time of doing this, I didn't know how to delete nodes in Lightburn, so I did a workaround by scanning it. But now that I know how to delete nodes in Lightburn, I will probably avoid scanning projects and do it that way. But for the time being, this is the pattern I came up with. In order to cut this out, I can only cut 3 at a time because this is about 60 inches long, is the size I need to get the diameter shade I want. So to make my life easier, I was just cutting 3 at a time. I kind of have a rough reference guide on the bed, so I could cut it, slide it over, line everything back up, and then cut 3 more, and I need 12 total to get this done. So like I said, the computer side of this will be at the end of the video. And you can see this is working quite well. I have the whole strip cut. This cuts paper extremely fast. This is just some rosin paper I have laying around the shop. And then there it is laying on the floor. And because I'm doing this quickly, it didn't cut through all the way in certain spots. I would fine tune the settings if this was more important, but it was okay to go through at this point and just cut the couple little spots it didn't get. The problem with paper is it's going to warp as the laser's going through, and as it moves on you, the focal point of the laser gets messed up, which is why it doesn't go through all the parts. Then I could tape this together, and that is the rough shape I'm looking for. Now at this point this looked a little too big to me, so on the piece I changed, I modified it and made it a little bit smaller. I wish I hadn't, because now the shade is actually a little too small. But basically from this point the idea was then I can then flatten it again and cut a pattern out of the piece. Now the pattern I want I haven't decided on, but I have so many files on my computer at this point, I decided to test out this more decorative pattern, and this was working quite well. I just overlaid the pattern onto the pieces, which is why you'll see it's cutting in the negative space as well. But the problem with that was the paper, like I said, started getting stuck on the probe, and I didn't modify the pattern enough, so it was detailed enough it was cutting off major parts of the piece. But you can see the spots where I did get it to work, it was actually going to look quite nice. But the other problem was this rosin paper was too thin. I didn't think it would hold a shape if I tried to glue it back together. And you could see the spots where the paper started lifting and it wasn't cutting all the way through, so that is also a problem. You could see the later laser markings are where it wasn't going to cut all the way through. So at this point I decided to simplify the design so it would cut faster. I just wanted to see if this would work at this point, and I got a piece of cardboard, a cardboard box, opened it up so it was a flat sheet, and I could try this again. So this circle pattern was just one I found on the internet, and like I said, I chose it because I thought it would cut a little bit faster than all the swirls, and this cut really nicely. You could see it's my complete piece. It's got all of the circles in it, and at this point I can now glue this together and see if this was going to work the way I wanted it to. I could perfect the pattern I want at this point, because obviously boxes are very easy to come by, and then eventually test this out of veneer. So usually I cut curves on the back of this stuff so it will bend, but because so much material was removed, I could kind of manually hand bend it and hot glue it together. So that's basically what I'm doing here. The other concern I have for when I decide on my pattern is I don't like the way, obviously since this is cut flat and then formed into a circle, the seams don't bother me as much as the fact that the pattern doesn't line up on the seams. So I'm thinking a more chaotic pattern will hide the fact that the seams it's going to be really hard to get the patterns to line up on the seams when you're cutting a flat shape. But basically I could just glue it all together. I made a very simple top and bottom for it so I could attach it to my lamp and it will hold the form. I glued that in the top and then another one in the bottom, and then I basically had my shape. And like I said, this is a successful prototype in my mind. It turned out the way I wanted to. Like I was saying, I was most concerned about the seams being visible, but because of the pattern, it hides the seams, especially at nighttime. You could see this is obviously lit up, and I really like the patterns it projected onto the wall. I think I might have to add a little bit more material on the top, because you could see the top shows the top harp more so than the pattern. On the other lamp I have, you could see it curves up higher, so there's not as much of that negative space at the top. So this is still something I'm playing around with, which is kind of how it goes with making things more creatively like this in patterns. So on to the computer side of things, if you're interested in that, this was what I had. In order to scan this, I had to spray paint it black, otherwise the lines weren't showing up on my scanner, and then I could input it into, I have Photoshop on my computer. Now, when I cut this, you could, on the laser, you could see it left some little nurdles on the edges, and you do not want that. If you upload that into Lightburn, which I'll show you, it picks up all of that information, and it will give you a wavy edge. So what I did was I actually sanded the paper pattern to make it smooth, rescanned it, and then I could upload it into Photoshop. Since I'm already in here, I'm going to duplicate the background and delete all the white so you see the triangles in the back. You probably don't have to do that for Lightburn, but I do it. It makes life a little bit easier. So you can see when you're zooming in on the original pattern, it's showing all those nurdles. That's what I'm showing here on the first one. And if I go to trace this image, which I'll show in a minute, it will pick up all of those undulations. Even though you can barely see them in real life, the computer's so fine at picking up detail, it will actually ruin your pattern. And then you could see all of the juts and the extensions in the pattern, the laser will try and cut all this and it will make a mess. So that's why when I first saw this in Photoshop, I sanded the edges of the pattern so they were really crisp and clean, and then you could see the rescanned image. If you zoom in, the lines are perfect. This is kind of a workaround to the fact I haven't learned how to use any sort of SVG editing or making software. I just don't have the time at the moment. So in order to get this 3 parts that I have here, I kind of learned that if you ungroup an entire group, so I right click it and ungroup it, and then I click on edit nodes, you can go through and highlight things and press the D button on your keyboard and it will delete stuff. You cannot do this if you don't ungroup your trace pattern, and if you aren't in edit nodes. That unfortunately was a very severe learning curve I had with messing around with these patterns, and at this point, since I have a nice original saved in my computer, I won't have to rescan this. I could just upload the original and edit the nodes and delete the parts I don't want. So you can see I'm going through and deleting it until I get 3. This one I did quickly so I didn't leave the sides open, which I need to do, but you can see that I have the original still on the computer. I just want to show you that's how you can modify these images in Lightburn. Ungroup the trace pattern, click on edit nodes, and the D button will delete the material you don't want. So then at this point, what I did in order to get this pattern was I just took my 3, because the one I made out of cardboard I cut all at once. I didn't cut out these sphere shapes first and then the pattern. I cut this all at once and I just overlaid it with my pattern, and I think there was 12 parts of this, and it took about a half an hour to cut each one, so about 2 hours to cut out that lampshade.